At 24, Julian Newman's tragic fate is sadder than you think. So Julian Newman was a teenage basketball phenomenon. You know what I'm saying? He was just like on top of the world. His family was doing good. His sister was good at basketball. However, he was just vertically unlucky, to say the least. You know what I'm saying? Retweet. I think he's shorter than me. I'm 5'9", average height. You know what I'm saying? Even if I was the best, the greatest at basketball, I'm not making it to the NBA, and I know that. And he had different dreams. You know what I'm saying? But let's get into this video. This video is by Hooper's Thread, if you guys want to lock in with Hooper's Thread. But yeah, let's see the fate of Julian Newman, man.
Wait, are you still training for the NBA though? Everybody got their path. Everybody got their, you know what I'm saying, their journey to get where they want to get to.
Just give it up, bro. Just give it up.
At 24 years old.
Just give it up, bro. Just give it up. No. He just got them dribbles, boy. When he was 14, I'm not gonna lie, his family kind of folded when they ain't give him that little jab. You know what I'm saying? You have to give him that little testosterone and the growth hormone, something, bro. Come on, lock in. You know what I'm saying? That's what I would do. Would I? Probably. I knew some kids in high school, and they were like the same height as me, like freshman year, sophomore year, and then their parents gave them that jab, bro. Their parents gave them that jab, and now they like 6'2". In my head, I wanted that shit so bad. Oh my gosh, I wanted it so bad. I remember I went to the doctor and like, oh, the growth plates in your hand are like a year behind. So I always thought like, oh, in a year I'm gonna be like taller type ish. It never happened, bro. It ain't what it is though.
Julian Newman's fate has become far sadder than most people ever imagined. Think about that for a second. 24 years old, that's the age when most basketball players are just hitting their prime. When most guys are on rookie contracts, grinding for rotation minutes, fighting for their spot on an NBA roster. That's when Luka Doncic was already a two-time All-Star. That's when Jaylen Brown was building toward a championship. At 24, Julian Newman is doing something very different. And here's the thing that makes this story hit harder than almost anything else in the history of youth basketball. This was not supposed to happen. This was not the plan. When Julian Newman was 11 years old, the entire country looked at him and made a collective decision. They decided they were watching a future star. The New York Times said it. ESPN said it. The biggest television shows in America said it. Millions of people online said it. They were all so certain. So what went wrong? How does one of the most famous young basketball players in the history of this sport end up here? That's exactly what we're about to break down. Because the full story of Julian Newman is not just about basketball. It's about what happens when the world builds a legend around a child before that child has had the chance to earn it. Stay with me, because this one goes deep. To understand what makes Julian Newman's story so unique.
I really just think it was his height though. Like I think he would, his chances would have went up like crazily if he was like 6'3", 6'4". You know what I'm saying? But like also, what are the fucking odds of being 6'3", 6'4"? That's why all the people in the NBA, bro, like they be like 6'5", 6'6". I'm like, what the fuck, bro? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like who's the shortest person in the NBA right now? Like, I'm sure they're probably like, what, 6 foot? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nobody in the NBA that's 5'9". I doubt it. I highly doubt it. Oh my gosh, you gotta be the best player in the motherfucking earth to get into the NBA at fucking 5'9", bro. And he gotta be doing 360 windmill under the legs, fucking dunks at fucking 5'9", bro. So, yeah, I think it was just his height, bro. I'm not gonna lie.
You have to understand just how early all of this started. We are not talking about a high school phenom who blew up junior year. We are not talking about a kid who went viral in middle school. Julian Newman was in the 5th grade, 11 years old, 70 pounds, 4 feet, and 5 inches tall. And he was already starting for a high school varsity basketball team. His father, Jamie Newman, had taken a job coaching basketball and teaching history at Downey Christian School in Orlando, Florida in 2012. He brought Julian along. The middle school team lasted about 5 minutes. Julian was so far beyond those kids that the coaching staff moved him up to varsity almost immediately, where he competed night after night against players who were 16, 17, and 18 years old. Players who had years of physical development on him, players who outweighed him by 80 pounds. None of it mattered. Through his first 3 varsity starts, Julian averaged 12.4 points, 11 assists, and 4.3 steals per game. 11 years old, his jersey was so oversized he had to tighten the shoulders with a hair tie just to keep it on. He had to roll the waistband of his shorts so they wouldn't drag on the floor. He was still the best player out there. Jamie Newman sent a highlight reel to Max Preps. What happened next changed everything. Within days, the internet exploded. The New York Times ran a full feature. ESPN picked up the story, Sports Illustrated followed, People magazine sent a photographer to the gym. Julian appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres Show, Good Morning America, the Steve Harvey Show. He performed a halftime demonstration at an Orlando Magic NBA game and the arena lost its mind. The Tampa Bay Times ran a headline calling him the most marketed 12-year-old basketball player in the world. They weren't wrong. And this is where the story gets complicated, because everything about that moment was real and manufactured at the exact same time. The skill was genuine, the handle was genuine. The court vision, the fearlessness, the scoring instinct, all of it was genuinely impressive for a player of any age, let alone a fifth grader. But Jamie Newman also understood exactly what he was doing from a marketing standpoint. He kept those highlight videos coming. He kept the cameras rolling. He kept Julian in front of every audience that would have him. And
tragic. They could have almost been the Ball family, bro, if they were just a little more talented vertically. You know what I'm saying? On the vertical end, just a little bit more talented. You know what I'm saying? Tragic. Honestly, you should have given them growth hormones. I'm not gonna lie. If you wanted your kid in the NBA, you knew he was about to be fucking 5'6". You know, you gotta do what you gotta do. Ask them, you know, why they 15. But like, bro, you want me to get these shits, bro? You trying to be 6 foot or what? Which I don't know the after effects of it. I don't know if it's like something terrible to do. But they'll give it to your kid. Like if your kid is just actually going to be like fucking really small, I think like you can get it. Like, it's not an illegal thing to do, I don't think. But anyway.
Jamie had been building toward this moment for a long time. By the time Julian was in the 5th grade and appearing on national television, his father had already spent years engineering his development. Julian's mother, Vivian, was a point guard herself who had played at University High School in Orlando before serving 4 years in the United States Navy. Basketball was in this family's bloodline on both sides. Julian began dribbling regulation-sized basketballs at 3 years old. Not child-sized practice balls. Regulation NBA basketballs. He was competing in recreational leagues against older kids before he reached elementary school, because Jamie Newman understood what every great development coach eventually learns, that playing up forces adaptation in ways that playing within your age group never can. As Julian got older, the training became elite level. Reports from that period describe Julian completing 200 free throws, 200 floaters, and 200 jump shots every single day at practice. Every single day. That is a professional caliber workload placed on a child's body and a child's mind. Jamie Newman was not raising a kid who happened to be good at basketball. He was building a basketball player from the ground up, the same way you would construct any serious long-term project, with a foundation laid in the earliest possible years and built upon relentlessly from that point forward. There was nothing accidental about what Julian Newman became. Every element of his development, his environment, his exposure, and his image was intentional. And for a while, it worked exactly as designed. The world did not need much convincing. Now here's where the numbers start telling a really important story, because Julian didn't just ride the hype, he backed it up statistically for years. As a 6th grader in 2013 to 2014, he averaged 17.4 points, 9.8 assists, and 3.6 rebounds per game. As a 7th grader, he became the youngest player in recorded history to reach 1,000 career varsity points, hitting that milestone at just 13 years old. He finished that season averaging 19.8 points, 10.2 assists, and 4.3 rebounds. As an 8th grader, 23.9 points, 11.4 assists, 3.6 rebounds. Year after year, the numbers went up. The viral clips kept multiplying. In 2016, Julian faced off against Kyrie Walker at the MSHTV camp, one of the most high-profile youth basketball showcases in the country. Walker was a top-ranked recruit with offers from Kansas, Arkansas, and Arizona. That single highlight reel from their matchup generated over 13 million views on YouTube. 13 million views on a high school basketball game. By his sophomore year, Julian had broken the Florida all-time prep scoring record that had stood since Teddy Dupay set it in 1998, accumulating 3,873 career varsity points. He starred in a documentary called Born Ready in 2015 that followed his daily life and training and drew massive viewership from fans who had become genuinely invested in where his career was heading. In his senior season at Prodigy Prep, a school his father personally founded and built specifically around developing elite basketball talent, Julian averaged 34.7 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds and 4 steals per game, 34.7 points a night. So the debate online was real and it was loud. Was Julian Newman going to the NBA? Was he the next Isaiah Thomas? Were the scouts sleeping on something that everyone watching those highlights already understood? But here's where things start to turn, and this is the part that most people missed while they were watching the mixtapes. There were quieter conversations happening in basketball circles, conversations that told a completely different story from what was playing out on social media. The first issue was competition. Downey Christian School and later Prodigy Prep competed outside the jurisdiction of the Florida High School Athletic Association. That matters enormously. Those programs were not playing against the fully sanctioned elite competition that college coaches relied on when evaluating prospects. When Julian appeared at high-profile showcases where the opposition had legitimate Power 5 offers, and scouts sitting portside, the gap between the legend and the reality started showing up in ways that couldn't be explained away. The skill was still evident. Nobody was questioning the handle. Nobody doubted the court vision. But next to players who were 6'2", 6'3", with 40-inch verticals and sub-5-second agility numbers, it was a fundamentally different conversation. Which brings us to the second issue. The one everybody was thinking, but nobody wanted to be the first to say out loud. His height. Julian Newman maxed out at 5 feet 5 inches tall. In a league where point guards, the smallest players on the NBA floor, typically stand 6'1" or 6'2", 5'5" is a number that makes professional.
Bro, when I was a kid, I thought Steph Curry was short. I thought he was short. I thought Steph Curry was like fucking my height. I thought he was 5'9", bro. And then one day I was like, I found out how tall he was. Nigga like 6 foot 6'1". I was like, the fuck is this? You gotta be that good to make it to the NBA at 6 foot, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, shit kind of crazy, bruh. Damn, what was that other basketball player's name? He was short. This was also when I was a kid. I think he played on the Nuggets. Fuck, what is his name? He got knocked out. He got knocked out by Jake Paul, I'm pretty sure, ain't it? What was his name? Didn't he fight Jake Paul? I think that was him. But yeah, fucking tragic that he got knocked out. But you know what I'm saying? Tragic that he only stopped at 5'5" when, you know, if his parents would have made a little decision earlier, could have been taller. Even though I'm not supporting doing that shit to your kid. You know what I'm saying? You don't know how it'll affect them. You don't know if their bones are gonna be brittle. You don't know your lungs. You don't know all this shit. So you know what I'm saying? I don't. It's sad. It's sad, to say the least. Anyway.
Evaluators go very quiet very fast. The comparisons to Isaiah Thomas circulated.
But I did, what's it called, when I was younger, I saw that dude and I was like, oh yeah, he's small, he's short as fuck. If I look up how tall he is, he's probably like fucking 5'10". He's probably like 5'10", 5'11". You know what I'm saying? Not even like short like that. You feel me?
Constantly online. But Isaiah Thomas stood 5'9". That is still considered remarkably short for the NBA. And Isaiah himself acknowledged that his path to the league was among the hardest any player had navigated in decades. Julian Newman was 4 inches shorter than that. The scouts who evaluate him publicly were consistent. The skill was legitimate. The ceiling at the professional level, given the physical disadvantages he would face on every single possession against every single opponent, was not. Basketball at the Division I level and beyond is a sport where every physical inch matters, where a 6'2" guard defending a 5'5" guard can simply put his hand up and erase shots, where a slight size advantage at the point of attack compounds across 40 minutes until it becomes an unsolvable problem. Julian could read a defense as well as anyone his age, but reading a defense means nothing when the defender is long enough to contest everything you see. Scouts also pointed to the competition level question that critics have been raising for years. The scoring records, the viral mixtapes, the 34-point averages, those numbers have been built against opponents who were not the caliber of player a college coach was recruiting to compete in a power conference. When those same basketball instincts got tested in environments with elite opposition and neutral evaluation, the picture became more complicated. And as the competition around him got stronger, faster, and more physically developed through his high school years, the style of play that had made him a legend began running into walls it could not break through. Something had to give. When Julian graduated from Prodigy Prep in 2020, the basketball world waited for a Division I announcement. Jamie Newman went on record claiming his son had received 15 D1 scholarship offers, mentioning programs like Kansas and Florida by name. The major recruiting services had no record of those offers. No official scholarship announcements came through any program's verified channels. Not one. The same player who had his face on the front page of the Sunday New York Times as an 11-year-old could not get a confirmed Division I offer at 18. Viral fame meant absolutely nothing to a college coach trying to build a tournament roster. The only thing that mattered was whether this player could compete against 6'2" guards with pro athleticism. And the honest answer, based on everything the scouting community said publicly, was that he could not. Julian then announced he would skip college and pursue basketball overseas. Germany, China, Italy, Australia, the G League. He laid out the options publicly and told his followers to stay tuned. Nothing materialized. No overseas contract, no professional deal, no announcement, silence. And then something that nobody who grew up watching those YouTube highlights would have predicted happened. Julian Newman stopped playing organized basketball, not for a month, not for a semester, for 4 years, from 2020 to 2024. One of the most famous basketball players in internet history did not compete in a single organized game. 4 years, let that land. This is a person who had been competing since he was 3 years old, who had played varsity basketball since the 5th grade, whose entire identity, as constructed by his family and amplified by a global audience, was inseparable from the game of basketball. And after graduating high school with no Division I offer, no professional contract, and no verifiable overseas opportunity, opportunity, despite what his father had promised publicly, Julian simply went quiet from organized competition. He stayed visible through social media, training footage, lifestyle content, occasional skill videos that reminded his followers he still had the handle, still had the vision, still had the same fearlessness that had made him famous a decade earlier. His name still pulled clicks because the nostalgia around his story was powerful. YouTube documentaries kept revisiting him, podcasts kept asking what happened, sports journalists and content creators kept checking back in, hoping for an update that will resolve the open question his career had become. But competitive basketball? Gone. The thing that had defined him since before he was old enough to go to school had disappeared from his life at the exact moment most players his age were first getting serious about the professional pathway. It raised a question that nobody around Julian answered publicly. Was this a strategic pause, training privately, waiting for the right overseas opportunity, preparing for a real run at professional ball? Or had the reality of where his career stood finally caught up with the narrative that had been built around him for a decade? The truth, as it almost always does, probably lives somewhere in between those two answers. And then in June 2024, Julian Newman made an announcement that surprised a lot of people. He committed to Bethesda University, not Division I, not Division II, not even a traditional NAIA program. Bethesda University is a small Christian institution in Anaheim, California, competing in the National Christian College Athletic Association. By any objective measure, it is the furthest point from the NBA that a career can land while still technically calling itself college basketball. Julian enrolled that fall at 23 years old, making him one of the oldest freshmen in his program. His collegiate debut came on October 24th, 2024, against the Masters University. He came off the bench. He played 9 minutes. He went scoreless, going 0 for 6 from three-point range. His team lost by 86 points. Sit with that number, 86 points. That was not a one-time result. Through the 2024 to 2025 season, Julian averaged 1.9 points per game on 16.3% shooting. His career high at Bethesda.
That AI picture is sick. Who the fuck made this AI picture of this nigga, bro? That's a sick AI picture, bro. That don't look nothing like him, boy.
1.9 points per game on 16.3% shooting. His career high at Bethesda University was 6 points, set in the game on November 13th, 2024. A game his team lost 107-54, a 53-point blowout on the road. The player who averaged 34 points a night during his high school senior season was scoring less than 2 points a game at an NAIA Christian college in Anaheim, California. The internet did not handle this quietly. The same social media ecosystem that had spent 12 years building Julian Newman into a legend was now cataloging his Bethesda box scores in real time. Reaction videos went up within hours of every game. Twitter threads dissected his shooting splits. YouTube channels built entire videos around his stat line. Comment sections that had once debated whether he was going to be an all-star were now making very different arguments. And that is the part of this story that carries a weight beyond the basketball numbers. Most players who develop at a slower pace than expected get to do so.
Yo, this shit, I'm not gonna lie, this shit like this will break a nigga. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that was a little minute ago, so I feel like time has passed. He's probably past it. But I remember I saw him play at DreamCon in the like celebrity or the creator basketball game. You know what I'm saying? But that was the last time I saw him, bro. But he was everywhere beforehand, but I know sadness. But at this point, like, you just have to become a social media, you know, person, honestly, or just go get a regular job. Be like, fuck this shit, I'm out. You know, just go to finish college and go live your regular life. You feel me? Or become a social media face.
Privately. They fail in gyms that don't have cameras. They get cut from rosters that nobody is tracking. They work through their development struggles away from any kind of audience. Julian Newman has never had that, not once in his life. The fifth grader who had People magazine photographers at his games grew into the 23-year-old whose NIA box scores were being screenshotted and posted to social media within hours. The price of that level of early fame is that the audience never fully goes away. And when the performance stops matching the legend, the audience gets to watch that in real time too. By mid-2025, Julian stepped away from basketball and began training for boxing at Fortune Gym in Los Angeles. The logic made sense in its own way. His hand speed from years of elite ball handling gave him a natural foundation that most boxers grind for years to develop from scratch. His reflexes, his footwork, his competitive psychology forged to a lifetime of being the smallest person in every competition he ever entered. Those transferred. His social media presence gave him genuine promotional value in the celebrity boxing space that had grown into a legitimate industry through the success of figures like Jake Paul and others who had turned internet fame into pay-per-view business. And boxing, crucially, does not have a height cutoff. Weight classes make height and reach relevant, but they do not disqualify you the way a league of 6'4" athletes does. Julian Newman, who had spent his entire life being told that his size was the thing standing between him and greatness, found himself in a sport where that specific argument doesn't apply the same way. Whether boxing becomes a genuine chapter in his story or another destination that doesn't quite land the way he hopes is still playing out. But what the pivot tells you about him is something his Bethesda stat line never could. He has not quit. He has not walked away from competition. He has not accepted a quiet exit.
That nigga got that fight in him. Nigga ain't never stopped fighting. Nigga been fighting all his life. Okay. I like that. It's sad story, but it's good that he found somewhere to, focus himself. And I think, fucking Tank is like fucking 5'6" or something, 5'5". You know what I'm saying? Mayweather's small as shit too. He's probably like 5'6", 5'7", 5'8", or some shit like that. You know what I'm saying? So maybe he's 5'9". I don't know how tall these niggas are, but I know they not tall for real. So he'll be on equal footing, except them niggas, a lot of them motherfuckers been fighting since they were kids. You know what I'm saying? So
At 24, he is still grinding, still betting on himself. The dream has changed shape, but the fire has not gone out. Now here's the bigger question, the one that Julian Newman's story forces you to sit with whether you want to or not. Was any of this inevitable? When you pull back and look at the full arc of what happened here, a pattern emerges that goes far beyond Julian specifically. Jamie Newman recognized extraordinary talent in the child and made a deliberate decision to market that talent as aggressively as possible, as early as possible. He put his son on national television before Julian was old enough to understand what national television meant. He built a school around his son's basketball ambitions. He created an entire environment where Julian was not a kid who played basketball, he was basketball. A brand, a headline, a destiny. And the qualities that made those early clips so compelling, the fearlessness competing against players twice his age, the handle, the swagger, those qualities were cultivated inside an ecosystem specifically engineered to produce them on camera. In that ecosystem, they looked extraordinary, but the ecosystem was not the NBA. It was not the Big 12. It was not even close to the level of competition those worlds required. And by the time Julian was old enough to be tested against a real standard, the distance between the legend and the reality had grown too wide to close. Forbes ran a piece back in 2014 questioning whether the media was wrong to be hyping a 12-year-old the way it was hyping Julian Newman. The argument was straightforward. Taking a child's athletic performance seriously enough to declare a professional destiny before adolescence creates expectations that the child will have to carry for the rest of their career, fair or not. At the time, most people dismissed that argument because the highlights were too good to resist. A decade later, that piece reads differently. Compare that arc to Kyrie Walker, the same player Julian went viral against in 2016. Walker built a conventional development path, earned legitimate Power 5 scholarship offers, competed at elite sanction levels throughout high school, and built a real professional trajectory from there. The difference between those two careers was not purely physical tools, it was development philosophy. The goal in Walker's career was to maximize his ceiling as a basketball competitor. The goal in Julian's story, at least as it appears from the outside, increasingly shifted over time toward maximizing his visibility as a basketball personality. Those two goals are not the same thing, and when they diverge early enough and hard enough, the consequences follow a player for the rest of their career. Julian's sister Jaden followed a similar viral trajectory and eventually signed with a Division I college program. Same family, same environment, different outcome. Which tells you this story does not reduce neatly to any single explanation. It is not simply the height, it is not simply the marketing, it is not simply the school choices or the scheduling or the competition level. It is all of those things layered on top of each other over years, compounding quietly until the gap becomes impossible to ignore. What keeps Julian Newman's name generating content years after his original moment of fame is something real. People who watch those highlights as kids carry a genuine emotional stake in his story. He represented something for a lot of them. The undersized kid who refused to be told he couldn't compete. The 5th grader tightening his jersey with a hair tie who was still the best player on the floor. He made kids who were too small and too slow and too young believe that those things didn't have to define them. That is not a small thing, it is actually a significant thing, and it explains why his name never fully disappears from sports media. The curiosity around what happened to him is driven partly by nostalgia and partly by something more complicated. A feeling among the people who rooted for him that the story owes them a better ending than the one they got. But here is something worth considering. Julian Newman's impact on youth basketball and sports media culture is genuinely undeniable, regardless of what happened to his professional career. He was the first. Before there was a cottage industry of youth basketball social media content, before AAU highlight compilations were a standard part of recruiting culture, before fathers everywhere learned that a well-produced highlight reel could change a kid's visibility overnight, Julian Newman was the proof of concept. He and his father figured out something that the entire industry eventually followed. The blueprint for marketing a youth basketball player through the internet was written in a gym at Downey Christian School in Orlando, Florida in 2012. Every kid who built a social media following before they graduated high school owes something to what Julian Newman proved was possible. Even if nobody intended to build a blueprint, even if the career that followed didn't match the promise of the original moment, the impact was real and it lasted. The truth about Julian Newman's career is not simply that he failed. The truth is that the story told about him was always larger than what the sport was going to allow. The gap between those two things became the defining narrative of his life in a very public, very permanent way. He was handed a destiny before he was old enough to choose his own. He spent his entire career chasing something the world had told him was already his. And at 24, he is still in the gym somewhere, still figuring out what he actually wants to build. That is not a tragedy in the traditional sense. It is something more complicated and more honest than that. It is what happens when the internet decides a child is great before greatness has been proven, when marketing outpaces development, when a legend gets constructed faster than a player can grow into it. Julian Newman did not create that problem. He inherited it at 11 years old, standing 4 feet 5 inches tall in a jersey held together by a hair tie. And whatever comes next for him, boxing, content creation, something nobody has thought to predict yet, the work ethic that Jamie Newman built into his son from the time he was old enough to hold a basketball is still in there. That part was never manufactured. That part was never a highlight reel. The kid always worked. The story just got written before he had the chance to finish it. And that, more than any box score or recruiting ranking or stat line, is the part of Julian Newman's journey that stays with you long after the video ends. Drop a comment and tell us, when did you first see Julian Newman? What did you think?
Yeah, I think, I hope he does boxing. I hope he does good in boxing because, you know, you never really want to see somebody fail. You know what I'm saying? And this is a testament to never quitting, honestly. Like, he is someone that never quit. And, you know, never quitting doesn't mean you have to stick with the same path the whole time. It just means, you know, you keep pushing. It just means you keep pushing. You don't got to always do what you started off doing. And, you know, a lot of people see that as a failure, but it doesn't have to be. It's only a failure if you allow it to be a failure. And, you know, sometimes you need to pivot, and that's okay. And that's okay. You feel me? So I hope he does well in boxing. You know, there's not a height issue with that. And I hope he continues to do content creation. You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be all about boxing. You know what I'm saying? Like, all these people know you. You know, show your personality. You can make YouTube videos. There's so many things that he could do, which I'm sure that he's doing. If I look up Julian Newman, I'm sure he has a YouTube channel. I'm sure he's getting hundreds of thousands of views on his YouTube channel. So I'm sure he's not like fucking drowning for money. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, crazy story to watch. Crazy story to watch. You feel me? And that's how I be though. But shout out to him. I hope he pulls it together, and I hope he does good in that boxing or whatever endeavor he decides to embark on. And for all of you guys too, whatever endeavor you decide to embark on, just keep pushing. Even if the finish line is somewhere else, it's not where you thought it would be. It's okay. As long as you get to the finish line, you feel me? Anyway, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And if nobody told you today, I love you. Peace.